There are K-pop stars who become famous because of a hit song. There are stars who become famous because of their looks. And then there are stars whose story is interesting long before the spotlight ever finds them. Jewel McDonie is one of those stars. Born in South Korea to an American father and a Korean mother, raised partly in the United States, and eventually transformed into one of K-pop's most recognizable faces, Nancy's journey crosses cultures, continents, music, television, and acting. She went from being a young girl with dreams of performing, to standing on some of the biggest stages in K-pop, to becoming a member of MOMOLAND, the group behind the worldwide hit, BBoom BBoom. But there is much more to Nancy than the glamorous photographs and viral performances. Who are her parents? What was her childhood really like? Does she have siblings? How did she enter the entertainment industry? And perhaps the question many fans are curious about: what is actually known about Nancy's love life, marriage, and children? Let's take a closer look. Early life. Jewel McDonie was born on April 13, 2000, in Daegu, South Korea. Her background immediately made her story different from many Korean entertainers. Her father, Richard McDonie, is American, while her mother, Lee Sung-ju, is Korean. This gave Nancy a multicultural upbringing from the very beginning. She wasn't simply growing up within one cultural environment. Her childhood was influenced by both Korean and American traditions. That experience would later become one of the defining characteristics of her public identity. Nancy spent part of her childhood in the United States, particularly in Ohio, before returning to South Korea. Growing up between two countries meant that Nancy had exposure to different languages, customs, and ways of life. And that multicultural experience would eventually become an advantage when she entered the international world of K-pop. She was comfortable with both Korean and English, something that would later help her communicate with fans around the world. But Nancy wasn't born with a guaranteed path to fame. There was no magic button that turned her into a celebrity. Like many young entertainers, she had to work her way into the industry. And that journey began surprisingly early. Her parents. Nancy's parents played an important role in shaping her multicultural identity. Her father, Richard McDonie, is American. Her mother, Lee Sung-ju, is Korean. Growing up with parents from two different cultural backgrounds gave Nancy an unusual perspective from an early age. She experienced life from both sides of the Korean-American cultural divide. Her family also supported her interest in entertainment. That support mattered because pursuing a career in South Korea's entertainment industry is not an easy decision. The K-pop industry is notoriously competitive. Thousands of young people audition. Only a small percentage become trainees. And an even smaller number eventually debut. Nancy's family therefore became part of the foundation that allowed her to pursue her ambitions. Her sister. Nancy has an older sister named Brenda Lee McDonie. Brenda is a talented musician and has pursued a career as a cellist. That means Nancy wasn't the only member of the family connected to the arts. While Nancy found her path through singing, dancing, television, and acting, her sister developed her own musical career through classical music. It's an interesting contrast. One sister became associated with K-pop stages, choreography, music videos, and television. The other pursued the world of classical music. Different paths, same family, and a shared connection to performance. Growing up between Korea and America, Nancy's childhood was important, because it gave her something that many entertainers don't naturally possess: cultural flexibility. She was exposed to American culture while also being deeply connected to Korean culture. That background helped Nancy navigate international attention later in her career. When MOMOLAND began attracting fans outside South Korea, Nancy already understood what it meant to exist between cultures. She could speak English, she could communicate in Korean, and she could relate to audiences who saw themselves in her multicultural background. For fans around the world, Nancy wasn't simply another K-pop idol. She represented something increasingly common in modern entertainment: a global identity. Education. Nancy attended schools in both the United States and South Korea. As her interest in entertainment became more serious, she eventually attended Hanlim Multi Art School in Seoul. Hanlim is well known for educating young people interested in fields such as music, acting, dance, and entertainment. For Nancy, education was happening alongside professional development. She wasn't simply sitting in a classroom waiting for graduation. She was simultaneously preparing herself for the entertainment industry. Imagine trying to balance schoolwork with auditions, rehearsals, training, performances, and the pressure of becoming a future celebrity. That was Nancy's reality. And she was still very young. Nancy's first steps into entertainment. Nancy's entertainment journey began before MOMOLAND. She became involved in performance and television at a young age. One of her early appearances came through Korea's Got Talent, where she appeared as part of a group. That experience gave Nancy exposure to performing in front of cameras and audiences. She also became involved with the entertainment group Cutie Pies. These early experiences were important because they allowed her to understand what life in entertainment actually looked like. But Nancy still had a long way to go. She wasn't yet a major celebrity. She was still learning, still training, still trying to find her place. And then came the opportunity that would completely change her life. Finding Momoland. In 2016, Nancy participated in the survival reality show Finding Momoland. The concept was simple but brutal. Young performers would compete for the chance to become members of a brand new girl group. There was no guarantee of success, no guarantee of debut, and no guarantee that the audience would remember you afterward. Nancy competed alongside other talented young women who shared the same dream. The pressure was enormous, but Nancy stood out. Her appearance, stage presence, dancing ability, and performance skills helped her become one of the show's most recognizable contestants. Eventually, she earned her place in the group, and MOMOLAND was born. Debut with MOMOLAND. Nancy officially debuted with MOMOLAND in 2016. The group initially consisted of several members and began building a following through music releases, performances, and television appearances. But the group had not yet reached its biggest moment. That moment was coming, and when it arrived, everything changed. The explosion of BBoom BBoom. In 2018, MOMOLAND released BBoom BBoom. The song became a huge hit. Its infectious melody, its playful choreography, its memorable hook, and its energetic music video. Everything came together. The song spread far beyond South Korea. MOMOLAND suddenly became internationally recognizable. And Nancy became one of the group's most recognizable faces. Her photographs circulated widely online. Her performances attracted millions of views. International fans discovered her. And the girl who had once been competing for a place in a new group was suddenly part of one of K-pop's biggest viral success stories. One song had changed the scale of her career. International fame. Nancy's multicultural background became particularly useful as MOMOLAND expanded internationally. She could communicate with English-speaking audiences and Korean audiences. Her American upbringing also made her relatable to many international fans. But fame came with a price. The more recognizable Nancy became, the more attention she received. Every performance could be photographed. Every public appearance could be discussed online. Every rumor could spread quickly. And for a young celebrity, that level of attention can be overwhelming. Nancy had to learn how to live with fame while still growing up. More than just a K-pop idol, Nancy's career wasn't limited to singing. She also appeared on television and explored acting. She demonstrated that she wanted to build a career that could survive beyond one music group. This is an important part of Nancy's story. K-pop careers can change quickly. Groups evolve, contracts end, musical trends change, members pursue solo projects. Nancy therefore had every reason to develop herself beyond the group environment. Acting and television gave her opportunities to show different sides of her personality. On stage, she could be energetic and charismatic. On camera, she could be more relaxed. And through acting, she could explore storytelling in a completely different way. Nancy's acting career. Nancy expanded into acting and appeared in Korean television productions. One notable project was the television drama, The Soulmate, where she took on an acting role. Although music remained an important part of her career, acting allowed Nancy to explore another form of performance. And this mattered because acting requires something very different from singing. A singer has to connect with an audience through voice, rhythm, choreography, and stage presence. An actor has to communicate through character, emotion, expression, dialogue, silence. Nancy was beginning to discover another side of entertainment: the pressure of being a celebrity. Behind Nancy's glamorous image was a young woman dealing with the reality of global fame. The entertainment industry can be unforgiving. Fans expect perfection. Photographs can be taken from every angle. Social media never stops. And rumors can travel around the world within minutes. Nancy experienced intense public attention during her years with MOMOLAND. This is one reason her private life has remained relatively guarded. She has generally avoided turning her romantic life into a public spectacle. And that's understandable. When millions of people follow your career, keeping something for yourself can become extremely valuable. Nancy's love life. Now we arrive at one of the most searched parts of Nancy's biography. Who has Nancy dated? The honest answer is that there is very little publicly confirmed information about a serious long-term relationship. Like many K-pop idols, Nancy has faced romantic rumors and online speculation. But rumors are not the same thing as confirmed relationships. Nancy has generally kept her romantic life private. There has not been a widely confirmed public marriage or long-term relationship that she has officially presented to fans. And this privacy may be deliberate. Rather than allowing romance rumors to dominate her career, Nancy has largely kept the conversation centered on her work. Her music, her acting, her performances, her achievements. Is Nancy married? As of 2026, Nancy is not publicly known to be married. There is no confirmed public record of her having a husband. This means that stories claiming she secretly married someone should be treated carefully unless supported by a reliable announcement or direct confirmation. Celebrity. Rumors can spread incredibly quickly online. A photograph can become a rumor. A rumor can become a headline. And eventually, people can start treating the rumor as fact. Nancy's story is a good reminder. Not everything on the internet is true. Does Nancy have children? As of 2026, Nancy has no publicly confirmed children. She has not publicly announced having kids. At this stage of her life, her public story remains primarily focused on her career and personal development. Whether she eventually chooses marriage and motherhood is something only Nancy herself can decide. And perhaps that's the beauty of her story. She doesn't need to follow anyone else's timeline. Life after MOMOLAND. MOMOLAND's journey eventually entered a different chapter. The group experienced changes in its lineup and activities, and the members began exploring individual opportunities. For Nancy, this created another important stage in her career. She had already proven that she could become internationally recognizable as part of a group. Now came the challenge of establishing herself as an individual entertainer. And that's a completely different game. Being successful in a group doesn't automatically guarantee solo success. A group gives you multiple personalities, multiple voices, and multiple performers. As an individual, the spotlight is entirely on you. Nancy therefore had to continue developing her identity beyond MOMOLAND. Nancy's multicultural influence. One of the most interesting things about Nancy is how naturally she represents the connection between Korea and the rest of the world. She is Korean American. She grew up across different cultural environments. She speaks both Korean and English. And she became part of a K-pop movement that eventually reached audiences across Asia, North America, Latin America, Europe, and beyond. In many ways, Nancy represents the globalization of Korean entertainment. K-pop is no longer confined to South Korea. And Nancy's own life reflects that transformation. Her personality and public image. Fans have often been drawn to Nancy because of her combination of beauty, charm, and stage presence. But one thing that makes her story particularly interesting is the contrast between her public image and her private life. On stage, confident, energetic, charismatic. Away from the spotlight, much more private. That balance is difficult for any celebrity. And it becomes even harder when you become famous at a young age. Nancy learned to perform for millions while also trying to maintain a personal life away from the cameras. Her legacy. So what will Nancy ultimately be remembered for? For many fans, she will always be associated with Momoland and BBoom BBoom. That song became one of the defining viral K-pop hits of its era. But her legacy can be broader than one song. Nancy helped demonstrate that a performer with a multicultural background could find a place at the center of Korean pop culture. She became an international face of K-pop. She moved between music, television, and acting. And she inspired young fans who saw something familiar in her story. A girl who belonged to more than one culture. A performer who wasn't afraid to explore different parts of entertainment. And a young woman who had to grow up under an enormous public spotlight. Nancy's journey is ultimately about more than fame. It's about identity. It's about growing up between worlds. It's about taking a childhood interest in performance and turning it into a professional career. It's about facing the pressure of an incredibly competitive entertainment industry. And it's about discovering that fame doesn't automatically tell you who you are. Nancy was born in Daegu. She spent part of her childhood in America. She returned to South Korea. She trained. She competed. She debuted. She became part of Momoland. Then, BBoom BBoom exploded. Suddenly, the world knew her name. But perhaps the most fascinating part is that her story is still being written. She started as a young girl with a dream. She became a trainee, then an idol, then an international celebrity. And now, she's building the next chapter of her career. Nancy's journey proves that sometimes the person who stands out isn't the person who tries hardest to fit in. Sometimes, being different is exactly what makes you unforgettable.